Today, we're going to be checking out the new Brutal Distortion from Airis Effects. So something I want to make very clear before we talk about the rest of this. This pedal is preamp distortion. I know it says distortion, but specifically on the website, it says it's emulating preamp distortion, which means that it's meant to not go into the front of an amplifier into another amp's preamp. It's meant to go into a power section. I'm going to be using it as a preamp. You might want to use it as a distortion into the front of an amp or stacking with something else. Your mileage may vary, but it is meant to be preamp distortion, so that is how I'm going to be using it. Now, Airis Effects did send this over to me when they sent me their Merciless drive, but of course, with them sending this over, they're not telling me what to say or making me, say all good things about it or anything like that. So I just wanted to make that clear that, of course, this video is going to be my honest opinion of the pedal and the gear. So this is a unique sounding distortion pedal bearing some very familiar but very brutal artwork from Airis Effects. Now, of course, you have your bass, middle, treble controls, your volume control, but then you have two separate gain controls. You have your pre-gain, which essentially is going to be like the preamp gain, like how much gain you have on tap, right? But then there is a post gain, and the post gain is doing its best to emulate kind of a power amp saturation. And really, you can think about this as another gain control to help you refine the kind of gain that you have. And what I mean by that is you can turn the pre-gain up and down all you want, but with the post gain all the way back to the left, you're going to find that everything is pretty dry, pretty tight, even with the pre-gain maxed out. But the more you turn the post gain up, the more thick and saturated and like nasty everything is going to be. So you can really play between the both of these to get a tone that's as dry or as saturated as you want. And like he says, for basically all the controls, there's really no wrong position for any of them. You just kind of dial in, this will be a little bit drier and tighter. This will be a little bit more, saturated and woolly. It's just kind of what your preference is for it. And I think it's cool that it's got that kind of flexibility, especially in the gain structure. Now, on that thing of there is no real wrong place for the controls, he really spent a lot of time with where each of the tone controls sits in the mix. Like the bass control really surprised me. You can turn that all the way down to the left, and it's not going to just be this little thin, pathetic thing. It's still going to, it's going to be tighter, obviously, but it's still going to sound right. And the more you turn it up, it's not going to turn to this big, farty, muddy mess either. It's just going to kind of enhance where the palm mutes are. It's going to make everything kind of feel bigger and chunkier. So I actually found myself kind of pushing the bass on this more when with other preamps and distortions I wouldn't. The mid-range is very much the same. You can boost it a bit or cut it a bit, and it really sits well around, kind of noonish, a little bit under, a little bit over if you want something more scooped or a little bit more mid-forward. And then you can even crank the treble control all the way without getting, super harsh and brittle, which again, most other distortions and preamps, if you do that, you're gonna get some nastiness in there you don't want. And I feel like he really, Richard from Airis Effects, he really took his time to dial in how he wanted these to control the tone stack. Now, I wouldn't say that it's going after a specific tube sound. It's definitely not trying to emulate any one amplifier. It's definitely more of like a solid state transistor style distortion, which, I mean, it is a solid state distortion. It's a distortion pedal. There's no tubes in it. But it really sounds like that. It's got this kind of nasty quality, this nasal quality to it, this tightness that you don't get with tubes. Like no matter where you have the bass set, it's always still tight. No matter where you have the mid or the treble set, it's always kind of cutting and aggressive and biting and almost harsh in a way that kind of pokes out of the mix and would be something that you'd want in a brutal sounding death metal style distortion. So that's all the features. Let's actually hear what this thing sounds like. I'm going to be plugging into it with my FGN Neoclassic that has a set of Hellbender Mojo Tone pickups into it. That guitar is going straight into the Brutal Distortion, And then that's going to go into my KSR PA50 power amp, which is then going to be going into my 2Notes Captor X, which has a VM1265 and DV77 speaker blend on it, and we'll hear it outside of a mix all in that same setup. Let's check it out. So this thing 100% lives up to the name, right? Brutal distortion. That distortion is absolutely brutal. It's nasty. It's cutting. It's biting. It's just gross death metal distortion all the way, and just really, really works good for heavier styles of metal. In particular, I think that gain control was a super good idea, both the pre and the post. So you can control just how dry or saturated you want the overall gain to be. I think that's a really good idea, and I think that more dirt pedals should do that, both distortion and I feel like preamp pedals. They could all really benefit from this, because being able to control just how saturated or just how dry something is, I think a lot of people would like that, and it would make gain pedals way more versatile for way more players. If I did have one critique for the pedal, it would be that it is, like I said, pretty nasty sounding, and there's no real way to tame that, which is great if you're playing some like disgusting, brutal death metal. But if you're trying to use it for something else, don't really have that kind of versatility. But in all fairness, it is called the Brutal Distortion, so you kind of get what you pay for, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna have a link down below if you want to check out this or anything else from Airis Effects. I always do highly recommend Airis Effects, just because they've been on my board basically since I've been buying and demoing these pedals for the entirety of this channel, and since before really that it started. Thank you for watching, guys. Stay metal.